Hi, you're listening to Engagement Drivers, presented by EveryoneSocial. Each week, we'll share actionable tips, strategies, and success stories that you and your teams can use to steer your brand, social, and employee engagement in the right direction.
Hello, everybody. Todd here, Director of Marketing at EveryoneSocial. Another edition of Engagement Drivers. We're going to be talking about the power of social media lurkers and the impact on your business. If you've heard the term social media lurkers before, you probably have a somewhat of an understanding of what that means. People who maybe aren't engaging, aren't posting, aren't sharing, aren't creating, but are still on these social platforms like LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, and consuming information and enjoying the content that they read, but they're not really taking actions, right? They're just kind of reading through things and then scrolling to the next thing. So we wanted to cover this because I think a lot of people who are thinking about, social media in the workplace, activating employee influencers, or just doing social media in general for their company pages, really rely heavily on engagement. And that doesn't mean that engagement isn't worth keeping track of, right? And can be good indicators of the success of your content. And doesn't mean that you don't want to get links from social media and get clicks back from those links. But we wanted to show the power of social media lurkers because these people who are the ones that are just consuming and scrolling are still really impactful for not only your personal brand, but can also impact company results. So we wanted to get into that and really kind of just share, what we're seeing, at least on our end too. So I think, we can quickly define what a social media lurker is, right? It's somebody who's active on social media platforms, but instead of participating or engaging with others, they just consume the information and then move on through their feed. Typically, these are users who are just passively viewing text, the images, or the videos, or even just visiting other people's profiles on some kind of recurring basis. However, posting, commenting, or liking on their content is either rare or it's just not done at all. And this isn't necessarily a bad thing, right? Of course, social media lurking can have its own, negative connotations. It becomes some kind of unhealthy obsession, right? Or somebody stalking people on social media, but that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about those who are just active users who just don't really engage. So in the context of business, these are people who consume content, but just aren't active participants, and they still matter. So most companies have people who lurk without interacting or engaging directly with the content from brand social accounts, from the ads, or from employees. These are people who just like to read and process and research information, which can still contribute to the trust in the brand and interest in working for the organization, or might even become a customer later on. And for employees who lurk on social media, this behavior can indicate that they're learning from others. And I give a good example. I'm fairly active on social media. You can find me on LinkedIn and Twitter, posting pretty often, but there's a lot of times that I don't like something, show the engagement or comment on something that I'm learning about. I just may not have an opinion about that topic, but it doesn't mean that I don't find the content educational or entertaining or valuable. And there's a lot of people that are like that too. Of course, I want to give that engagement, that like, or that validation to people who are posting really good stuff, but I don't always do it. And it doesn't mean that I don't value their thoughts or opinion. So after all, putting yourself out there on social media channels can also be fear-inducing, kind of make you feel like you don't have much to contribute, which is another reason why, a lot of people might not always comment or engage with stuff. And it's a natural feeling. And I'll talk a little bit about that shortly here. But that's another common reason you might see. And if you're not alone in kind of these thoughts, we really want to talk about, have you heard about the 1%, 9%, 90% rule? So I actually covered this a little bit in one of our previous blog posts about why employee advocacy programs fail. And I also talked about that in a previous podcast episode too. So I'll give you a little more context here. So kind of what it breaks down to is, what percentage of social media users are lurkers? So when we break it down, it's 1% of people are the content creators, 9% are the engagers. So people who might not really create content, but are still actively commenting or liking or showing some kind of intent on someone's post, but 90% of the consumers. So that means for every person creating content, about 9 people are the engagers, the commenters, the reshares, or the likes. And around 90 people are just there to consume it. And there's a lot more research on this from the Nielsen Norman Group, which you can totally, Google and you'll find it right away. It's really interesting stuff. Definitely would check that out. So, why do people rarely engage on a post or create social content? So what we're seeing is that you can typically expect that 90 to 99% of people tend to be social media lurkers or passively consuming and watching their feeds instead of posting or engaging directly. Now, that can be a little tough when you have ROI to report and you need to determine how content resonates with your audience. But if you're not, it's not always a sign that your content isn't valuable or positively impacting your brand. But overall, why do so many people rarely engage or post content on social media channels that they're members of? So we broke it down to a couple of reasons, and hopefully some of these might be relatable to you. And don't worry, I think as if you are one of those who are more on the sidelines and are curious about posting content, it just comes with time and practice and kind of getting over the fear of putting yourself out there. And that's kind of the first thing. Putting yourself out there potentially for thousands of people to see, is scary. It can be intimidating, anxiety inducing to contribute in such a public format. And we get that. Even the most confident person in the world can still feel nervous about being a content creator on social media. It's one of those things you can get in your own head and just really experience self-doubt. You start asking yourself, what if no one cares? What I'm posting about? Like, what if people start to troll my content? It for sure can be a barrier that blocks not only you, but if you have a social media advocacy or influencer program at your company where you're trying to encourage employees to be authentic and have their own personal brand, there can be that roadblock for people. Another reason is they doubt they can make a valuable contribution. Many people don't want to post on social media unless they have something valuable to share. The problem is that many people assume that their knowledge just isn't good enough, when in reality, it most certainly is. Even the most basic things, just because you know something or it seems very elementary to you, could actually be groundbreaking for somebody else. You really just don't know, and not everyone knows everything that you know. So if you're interested in topics, for sharing, and you're just starting to learn the ropes of social media, it's okay to not engage in the conversation. And it takes time to be comfortable online. So we get that. But often we find that people can be hesitant to weigh on subjects they even know extremely well. There's also a fear of commitment, right? Like all things in life, people need to commit to an effort for results to happen. And in social media, it's literally no different. Certainly one of your social posts could go viral, right? Or get some good attention, but it's not as common as many people like to hope or think. But posting and engaging on social media content can seem time consuming. And then there's that generating the fear of commitment that this is going to take me every day, hours to do. Most people become social media lurkers because they're interested in social, but they're just not sure that they want to be fully invested in it yet. And again, that's perfectly okay, because these people may still consume and take action later on. Another thing that could happen for people who might be nervous about, creating or sharing content is they have imposter syndrome. The words thought leader, influence can sometimes be cringeworthy terms for creators. And far too often people claim to be these things who aren't truly influencers and creators. But there's the ones who are truly influencers who still have imposter syndrome, right? They don't see themselves as somebody in this space. And according to EveryoneSocial, imposter syndrome refers to an internal experience of believing that you're not as competent as others perceive you to be. While this definition is usually narrowly applied to intelligence and achievement, it has links to perfectionism and the social context. Just many people just don't see themselves as experts in their fields or think their audiences just won't really care about what they post. However, majority of the time, the reality is that there are people who look up to these individuals and find value in their knowledge. And I think the other thing to keep in mind is when you hear these terms of influencers or being active on social media, that people feel they need to have this great big network to have influence or to be part of the community. And it's not true. It doesn't matter if you have 300 connections in your social network or 10,000 plus. Putting yourself out there and sharing the things you know and learned, people will still find value in what you share. So there's a common reason is that sometimes I think people become more on the social media lurking side. And again, nothing wrong with that at all. But those are all things I've experienced too, as I start to kind of get comfortable posting and creating. And sometimes I still feel that way where it's like, hey, I don't feel like I have the right experience or insights to share. But the more I kind of post things out there, the more I realize that, no, this is a good thing to share. And these are things that I have experiences with that maybe could help somebody, regardless if it's very beginner level or more expert level of content or information that I'm sharing. So the other thing to keep in mind now is, does the lack of engagement mean your content doesn't resonate? So if you are someone who is posting or creating or leads a social program for employees to create, if there isn't a ton of engagement in everything, doesn't mean it's not working. And for a lot of people, the holy grail to social media marketing and success is engagement. Are people liking it? Are they commenting? Are they starting conversations about the post? How many views and clicks and video plays are you getting? And engagement on your content can certainly be an excellent indicator that people are finding value in your content. And it's perfectly fine to monitor this, especially if you run social media accounts, you have an employee advocacy platform. These are all cool indicators to see, kind of shows you your earned media value based on what it would cost you to pay in advertising. And that people are actually taking actions on it. However, one of the things that I've noticed too, and just over time, is that sometimes people get too caught up in the engagement game. So you might start tracking to try to hack algorithms, right? Or change your strategy completely, even though there's nothing wrong with your current one, because you're just looking for that kind of dopamine of engagement, right? And we see these kind of interesting company contents on even LinkedIn, where they're like meme accounts or very specific humor to a marketing group or, something like that. And they're very focused on engagement. It can grow their accounts really quickly, but a lot of it is just rehashing old things, or they're just there to get the engagement and not actually provide certain value. And it happens. And you have to remember too, again, the majority of people, about 90%, are social media lurkers and will consume your content without taking a single action. And we've seen and heard many examples of people who post content that don't get a lot of engagement, but later on, buyers are coming through and saying that the content that they saw XYZ post or this company post or this employee post impacted their purchasing decision or made them take action on the website, right? Or came back to the company and became a brand supporter. The moral of the story here is that engagement shouldn't be the determining factor of whether your posts are effective. It certainly can be something you monitor, but you don't want to neglect the social media lurkers out there. If you have a plan for your content, if you know who your target audience is and you're writing and creating content that's around that, those people discover you, they'll start to follow you, they'll find you. Eventually you'll start getting engagement too. But putting that kind of information out there is super powerful. And we're seeing it now too for our own company at EveryoneSocial. We're putting more emphasis on using our own program and platform to help us generate not only awareness, but empower our employees to become their own thought leaders, to become their own best self and to have their own voice. And we're not encouraging them just to write about company content or the brand. It's what they're interested in. What insights do they have to share? And those things are impacting our brand too, because it's not all company related, but people see where they work, right? They're looking at their profiles, they're connecting, they're beginning to have this online relationship and trust with them. And not all of them are engaging constantly or commenting or, taking action on these posts. And I've seen it with stuff that I post too, is I get an okay amount of engagement sometimes, but a lot of times I don't, but there's still good views on there. We're seeing more people come into our pipeline from just LinkedIn or Twitter because they're seeing our content first, which is fantastic. And that's kind of the whole point of sharing and creating content for your own personal brand and on behalf of the company. And what's really exciting is a lot of those people we don't necessarily always see engaging with our content, right? There's a great example recently where I saw a demo come through for our product and they said they heard about us through LinkedIn, and I've only saw them engage with one of our posts on our company page, and I haven't seen them really engage with any of our employees' content, but they're connected to a few of us. So I know they're consuming the information we're putting out there, and then they decided to take action because they felt not only is this product interesting to them, there's value here, but they've probably learned a bit about our space and things that employee social networks can do for not only, employees, but their company. And we'll see what happens from it. But that's what's really cool about this, right? So I think the whole kind of point here is don't worry too much about engagement. It's important. You still want to keep track of your ROI and social programs and understand your earned media value and kind of the reach you're having. But you have to also think about the ROI of things that you can't always directly measure, but that these social media lurkers are people who are consuming and taking in your information and might be coming back later. This is a long going process. It's not something that just happens overnight. And too often people want to flip the switch of employees sharing and creating content or engaging and hope for massive results right away. Now, you of course can see quick results pending the organization, pending your culture and how excited employees are to get involved in this mission. But this stuff takes time, and consuming takes time. People discovering you and learning about you, the way they buy has changed. But this is a great way to get started. So we wanted to make sure that you totally understood the value of social media lurking today, especially for business, especially as you explore either generating more social content or activating your employee influencers and having them be a part of the voice and the messaging of your brand. These things will take time, but don't neglect them. Social media lurking is still important, and people are still those who are just consumers and just looking for that educational material, but don't really take action on anything. And that's okay. So hopefully this is interesting to you. We have a more in-depth article about this on our blog as well. So you can search social media lurkers and you will find this post. But hopefully this made a lot of sense, and we'll talk to you next time. All right. Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening. We'll be back next week with more engagement insights. Want to know how EveryoneSocial can provide you with the tools needed to keep everyone at your company connected, informed, creating, and sharing? Visit EveryoneSocial.com to learn more.